All right, a couple things just to kind of wrap up the first half there, and then I want to crank into some new stuff. Put two thoughts up here. I'll do the second one first. The first thing, so we talked about how the first article is where we start. Second article is about the restoration. This means that we should be fighting against the curse. We resist the impact of the curse. And so as somebody pointed out, so I guess epidurals are fighting against the curse. And actually, you can make a case for that. Now, you know, whether or not you're a big believer in that or not, whether you want to do it all natural, that's your call. But the point is that we do fight against the curse. We fight against the inroads of the breaking down. And this kind of ripples out into all kinds of interesting applications. See, I would actually contend that when you mow your lawn and take care of stuff, you're fighting against the curse. You're fighting against the kind of the downward pull. So when you fight against the dandelions, you're fighting against the curse. You're fighting against that downward pull, that entropy that just kind of pulls everything down. No, you're going to resist that. We're going to fight against that. And so when a doctor is engaging in his work of medicine, he's fighting against the curse. And when you, in your marriage, work at overcoming the tendency to kind of, you know, the man has this tendency to abdicate, and the woman has a tendency to take over. When you fight against that, you're fighting against the curse. Because you see, just like the woman's temptation is to usurp, the man's temptation is to lay back. And this is his greatest curse, is wow, I got other things to do, I'm busy, too tired, and he just lays back. And so when she tries to take over, he lets her. And he doesn't like her for doing it. She hates him for not standing up and being a man. But this kind of complicit, they get along. So he's on the couch being a couch potato, and she's out running the show because he won't do it. And she despises the fact that she has to do it, and he doesn't like her for taking over. But neither of them are doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's just the built-in struggle. Yeah.
Fight against the curse. Are we doing God's will?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It is God's purposes that we resist this and we do things His way. And so even, say, an unbeliever, a doctor who's, you know, working, a surgeon, he is actually doing God's will, serving God's purposes, and sometimes in spite of himself. He might be an atheist. Doesn't matter. He's still, in a sense, resisting Satan's activity. And that's a good thing. Yeah, Tina.
Well, and some would argue that we're sinful so we can never overcome it. But the text you gave us for Genesis 4, it sounds like God is telling Cain he can actually master.
Stand against it. Yeah. We are responsible to fight against it. Now, sin is infiltrating us, so we're always, you know, being bombarded by it, but it is our responsibility to fight against it and to push against it and to give it everything we've got to try to stem the tide. Absolutely. Yeah, all the way back.
Does that impact the church also, what you were talking about, men abdicating and women?
Yes, it does. You bet it does. Actually, my game plan was that next week I was going to get more into the church, because I promised that on the little blurb that, you know, drew you in. And so so I'm planning to get to that next week in more detail, but you bet it does. Absolutely. And and I think we've seen, you know, most of us have kind of watched this happen. And you know, a woman wants to do it. Guys, what's his first reaction? Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Let her. Great.
But there's this urban legend that at one time men were men and women had aprons. Was that all a myth too?
Was that all? I don't know if it was all a myth. I mean, I got old. I can see Nickelodeon, you know, Leave It to Beaver, you know. But I'll talk about that a little bit. But I don't know if that's all myth. And some people say, well, that's anachronistic. You can't go back. But there's actually, there are some good things about a lot of that. Before I forget, I'll pursue this one just a little bit here. What's fascinating to me is sitcoms. I haven't watched a sitcom in 10 years, but when I was watching sitcoms in the 90s and 80s, it was, I'm assuming it's still the same way today, the dad or the guy in the family is always portrayed in what kind of role? Yeah, a basic idiot. You know, Bill Cosby was the best one going, but even he was kind of a screw-up a lot of the time. So the dad's usually the idiot. Who's the savior? Who always has the act together? The mom, yeah. And this is the way it is. And you see, what really kills me is when the Berenstain Bears do this. Yeah. You know, those of you who have kids, I hate the Berenstain Bears. You know, they seem innocent, but the dad is a total screw-up. Always messing things up, and the mom is always fixing everything and kind of rolling her eyes at dad. Well, this is a great way to teach our kids. Well, wonderful role modeling. But you see, it's completely, absolutely sexist. That's what it is, against men. And this is the way it is. And then you look at these old shows in the 50s, and we make fun of them now, but there's something really beautiful about the way Ward Cleaver comes home and runs the show. And he did. And his wife was not a doormat. You know, she's wearing her high heels and apron and kind of, you know, wow, maybe that's a little over the top. But she's actually a fulfilled woman, you know, and we kind of think that's, you know, quaint and, you know, silly. But no, that's probably closer to a beautiful picture of how God wants it. Not that I'm trying to, you know, endorse that and everything that goes with that. But there's something to this idea of the complementary and how that plays out. Now, we'll talk about that more. But is that getting, okay. All right, so that's the first thing. Resist the curse. Second thing has to do with this whole question of freedom. Because someone was saying, now wait a minute, Adam and Eve had free will. That's why they could sin. And I started hedging because, you see, I don't believe in free will anymore. And I know this is not the time to say this in a group of people who have not heard this idea, but I don't. I don't believe free will is really reality. I think we are creatures. That means we are here to do God's purposes. We don't get to kind of call our own shots. That's why I don't believe in this idea of free will. I'm fundamentally opposed to it. But you see, the idea of freedom, we get this wrong because we hear freedom and we think Declaration of Independence. And we think American definition, 4th of July freedom. Freedom means I'm not going to listen to any stupid British king. I'll do my own thing. And so freedom means free to do what I want. That's not the definition of freedom. The Bible tells us that when you're free to do what you want, that's called slavery to sin. So it's not freedom, it's slavery. Freedom is actually freedom according to God's plan. So freedom means obedience to God's law. And what's fascinating is John Paul II wrote a piece called Veritatis Splendor, the glory of truth, in which he argues rather beautifully that real freedom comes only when we live in obedience to God's purposes. Because until we conform to God's purposes, we are like a fish out of water fighting against the plan. Unwilling to yield ourselves to what God has wired and put together, resisting it, trying to do it our own way, and it will not work. And so we have to learn to yield ourselves, and when we yield ourselves, what we find is it fits, it's right, it works. It's like putting on the comfortable jeans and the shoes, and it's all just, this is how it's supposed to be. This is right. It's perfect. And that's the idea. So when we find ourselves in the groove that God has cut for us, it works. And see, this gets back to the whole male-female thing, the man-woman, the husband-wife thing. The husband, it's his job to be the head. And when he's doing that, it feels right. He says, this is good. This is right. This is how it's supposed to be. And when the woman is following, allowing him to lead, and enabling him, it will feel right to her. I insist on this, and I know I'm not a woman, so I'm, talking out of ignorance, but I know for the male side, when the guy has got his act together and he's leading and it's working, nothing's better than that. It's as good as it gets. Because you're where God wants you to be. So freedom is always freedom in the law. And this is completely opposite the way our world thinks, because the world wants to have freedom from instead of freedom for. And we would define freedom as freedom for God's purposes rather than free to do your own thing. So it's a totally different understanding of freedom, but this is the really correct understanding of freedom. And it does tie into the male-female thing, again, hugely. Because you're not free when you're kind of cutting yourself free from restraint. You're free when you learn to conform to God's purposes. And you think about this in your own life and you see how true it is. I really believe that's the case. I've counseled a few young people who go off to college, and one of the big surprises that most young men have to make, and I suppose women make it somewhere along the way too, is that real maturity means learning to be under authority. And the culture tells us to question authority, and that the rebel, he's the man who's the real man. But actually, any idiot can be a rebel. It takes a real mature man to be under authority and to find fulfillment there. And that's the secret here. So we learn to live in the law. All right. Now, on to some new stuff. Oh, before I forget, I reference a few books from time to time, and I've got a list here of some resources if you want to get bib information, and you can pick one of those up later. If you don't care, that's fine too. So that's why I'm not passing them out. But you can grab those there. The books I've referenced are on there, and that might help if you're interested in going a little further. All right. Next book I'm going to talk about is this guy, Wayne Grudem. Wayne Grudem is not a Lutheran. He's an evangelical of some stripe. He's a New Testament commentator who actually writes New Testament stuff and kind of fell in by default into kind of being the leader of what's known as this complementarian understanding of marriage, or a biblical foundation for manhood and womanhood. He argues in defense of what I've been presenting to you. The idea of man is head and woman is follower, is the helper, and this is the way God has designed it. And he has become kind of the leader of this group that's really working hard to fight for this and to push this forward against what is known as an egalitarian or a feminist egalitarian view, which holds that men and women are across the board equal and therefore interchangeable, essentially the same. And he's saying, no, they're not. The differences are there, differences need to be paid attention to, and they play out. So what I'm going to be presenting to you here for the next part of the class period is coming from some of the stuff he has given. And I'm changing a few things here and there, but I want to kind of run through some of the key points he makes if we're going to hold to this complementarian understanding of marriage. The idea that the man and the woman are different and come together in their differentness to form a beautiful union. So the first point he makes, and this should be stressed, and hopefully I've been doing this, but maybe not enough. The first point he makes is that man and woman are equal in value and dignity. So, man and woman, or woman and man as I just have it here, are equal in dignity and in value and importance. So they're equal in value and dignity. They are equally gifted. See, I do not want you to get the idea that, well, if the man's the head, then he's got more. No, just different. Who's got the greater gifts? They're both gifted. Who's got the greater value? They are both valuable. Who's got the greater dignity? Both have great dignity. And the key to this is remembering what we have in Christ, that Christ is in submission to the Father. It's not a negative thing. We'll talk more about that. But this is very important. We need to stress this, that the woman and the man are equal in value and dignity and are gifted, equally gifted. The distinction between the man as head, and I'll put this here because I'm going to be referring to this a lot, and the woman as helper. And the idea implicit here is leader and responsible, and then the follower who is aiding in this. That this complementarian ideal is not an issue about who's got the gifts or who's smarter or who's better at something. It's irrelevant. The point is, this is just the way that God has put it together. I don't care if the wife has an IQ of 150 and the husband's got an IQ of 80. Doesn't matter. He is still the head, because that's just the way God put it together. Just the way it is. Now, the wife might be counseled maybe not to marry him, but that's a different issue. So, he is the head, she is the helper. It's just the way that it is. It has nothing to do with gifts. So there are equal value, equal dignity, equally blessed and gifted by God for the roles that they have. All right. And the second point then is women and men have different roles. And this is the key. This is the crux of it all. Men and women have different roles in marriage. And remember, I told you last week, everything's all about marriage. We're not trying to say that across the board, men are just always in charge and women are not in charge. But marriage is this way, and so therefore, other things are also reflecting this. More on that next week and the week after. That's the game plan. So this is the way God has established it in marriage. This is the plan. This is the pattern. They have different roles. They're not interchangeable. The guy is supposed to be the head. He's supposed to be the leader. And the woman is there to help and to follow and to assist and to enable him to be able to do what he needs to do. This is how it works. Now, practically, how does this kind of work out? It's important to stress it has nothing to do with skills or abilities or talents. Nothing. It's just the way it is. Even if the woman is a natural-born leader in the home, he has to be the leader, or it will not work. Things are just going to be out of whack. It's going to be wrong. Now, there are several things you can point to scripturally that support this. I've already been presenting some of them. We saw them playing out in the story of Genesis. This is where a lot of it comes from. A couple other things I haven't stressed, but I want to call your attention to. When God creates, he creates Adam, and then Eve is created as his helper. Adam names Eve. Significant. Naming always implied, especially in the Hebrew mind, that he has the kind of authority to do that, to give the name. So he names her. That's significant. It's also significant, as I've already pointed out, that when God comes to call Adam and Eve to account, he holds Adam responsible. And Adam is the one who is ultimately held responsible for everything that's going on. And the human race also is named man. This is starting all the way in Scripture. It's not some kind of accident of language, but God is intentional about it. So in a sense, he encapsulates everything. So there's this idea of this headship, this kind of responsibility, this accountability. Eve is created for Adam and not vice versa. Now, don't fight this and don't say, oh, this is really annoying. Because this is not a matter of trying to put a woman down. It's not a matter of trying to build up the man. It's just saying, this is just the way it is. There's just this ordering. It's the way God put it together. If you got issues with it, you take it up with God, not his messenger. So Eve is created to be the helper for Adam, which means he has the responsibility and she's there to assist it to get it done. And even Scripture sometimes talks about how God is our helper. You say, well, God's above us. Yeah, but see, the point is, when God is our helper, he's helping us do what we need to do. We're still the ones responsible to get it done. So that is that relationship of helper. The other thing to stress, and I've already touching on this, is that the New Testament does not overcome or overturn this order of creation, but restores it. And this is critical. And we got on this last week a little bit when I took you to Ephesians 5, but tonight I want to take you to Colossians chapter 3. So you go to Colossians chapter 3, and we'll take a look at verses 18 to 19. Now, you know Ephesians chapter 5 has this great stuff on man and women. Ephesians and Colossians are actually almost parallel letters. Most scholars think that Paul probably wrote them about the same time, and they follow the same exact pattern and almost the same topics, almost in the same order. So they very much mirror each other. So in Colossians chapter 3, we have Paul addressing the relationship between men and women. So chapter 3, 18 and 19. Wives, be subject to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, and do not be embittered against them. So there you have it. You have very clearly the husband is to love his wife, and the wife is to be in submission, as it says here, be subject. And it's critical that Paul says here, in the Lord. This is what his plan is when you're in Christ. This is the fulfillment. And so the plan that was there in Genesis 3 or in Genesis 2 is reaffirmed in the New Testament, which fits what I was giving you over here with the whole idea of restoration back to the plan. And what's the plan? Husband as head, wife as helper. That's the plan. So the New Testament is putting us back in that plan. All right, good. This then, how does this play out? You guys were pushing me on this a little bit last week. What's this look like? Well, I would say this looks different in different couples. I mean, every man and woman are a little different. Each couple's a little different, but there are some things that will be the same. And the key here is this idea of leader, and the real point here is responsible. One of the points that Grudem makes, one of the insights he has, I think is very helpful, is he realizes that what it really means to be responsible and to be the head is that he is to be the leader all the time. All the time. I have heard a lot of Christian couples say, well, yeah, we recognize the biblical norm, and he ultimately is responsible, but we make all of our decisions together, and when we can't agree, then he'll decide. Does that work in reality?
No.
No. And I was looking for a no. It doesn't. It doesn't work, because if the two of you can't agree, and he's going to just make the decision anyway, how happy is she going to be with that? It's not going to work. It doesn't work real well. Okay? And so that's not what that means. That's not what I'm describing. When I talk about the husband as head and the wife as helper, he is leader, she is follower, I mean all the time. He's the leader. He's the one who makes decisions. He's the one who sets the trend. So this goes back even like to a dating situation. So it's time to go on a date. Where are you going to go out to eat? And the guy says to his wife, because he's trying to be very chivalrous, where would you like to eat tonight? And what does she say? I don't care. And so he says, well, I don't care either. So you decide. And then at that point she says, no, really, I don't care, you decide. And now he's going to play, he's not going to be a chauvinist, so no, 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 I want you to decide. And at this point she becomes angry. Because she really wants him to decide. She wants him to lead. And so he needs to. So what he needs to do is he needs to make a decision all the time. This gets to the little things. The wife calls from the kitchen. Honey, can I make you a sandwich? Sure. What kind do you want? I don't care, you decide. She doesn't want to hear that. She wants him to decide. I'm serious. Am I right, women? All right? Yes. Okay. And he doesn't want to be bothered with it, but he needs to. See, the point is this leading is all the time. Now, this is not heavy-handed. This is not dictatorial. Back to what restaurant do you want to go to? This guy's not an idiot. He knows his wife. He knows she loves Chinese, and he happens to be a fan of Mexican. So he says to himself, well, this is my chance to get Mexican, because she said she didn't care, but I know better. She really does care, and so I am going to do what I need to do. Let's get Chinese. And she smiles and says, that sounds great. Everybody's happy. He's led. He's cared for her. He's loved her. She feels cared for. She feels protected. This is the big word, protected. Secure. A woman wants to feel secure. And when her husband is leading, she feels secure. This is critical, guys. And men just don't get it. We don't get it. And we drop the ball so many times on not leading the way we should and not taking the responsibility, not caring. And we leave our wives feeling unprotected, and then they get frustrated, and then they start kind of doing things themselves, and the whole thing goes because the man isn't leading. He needs to realize he needs to lead all the time. Not in a heavy-handed dictatorial thing, but just, I'm here, I'm responsible, yeah, don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about it. You're not responsible. I am. Give you another example. Paying the bills. All right? So does this mean, wow, he's responsible, he's got to handle the budget? Not necessarily. And when I got married, my wife said, I'll do the budget because I like that. I said, cool. You like doing the numbers? You can have it. And so she does it. I never see a bill. The bills come, she takes them and pays them. But I know what's going on. I know where the numbers are, I know what's happening in our budget, and I know where things stand, and we talk about all the time about what's going on, what our plans are, and she knows that she's not responsible for figuring out where the money comes from. She's just responsible for writing the checks and making sure they all get paid on time, which she enjoys doing. She likes deadlines and all that kind of stuff. That's her thing. So that's great. And so she thrives at doing that, and she's got a gift for this, but who's responsible? I am, and she knows it, and it's cool. But I don't have to kind of micromanage it. And so you see this works out. Another example, mowing the lawn. Who's responsible to make sure the lawn gets mowed? Well, I am, but she likes to mow, and so we fight over the lawnmower, because I like to mow too. And it's kind of a weird thing, but she enjoys it. And another thing, I like doing dishes. I know, a weird thing, but I like the satisfaction of getting clean dishes. It's a cool thing, a clean kitchen. I like it. And so I will frequently do the dishes. Does that mean I'm, whoa, women's work? No, I'm just doing something I enjoy doing, but we all know what the roles are. Head, helper. And my biggest challenge is not, somehow being demeaned or diminished into the role. My biggest challenge, I'll admit, is always trying to make sure I keep doing the head leadership thing. Because it's so easy to abdicate and to slide into inactivity. And I have to work intentionally at making sure I do that, because I'd rather not. It's hard. But that's what I need to do. And if I don't, my wife suffers for it. That's what it looks like. That's how it plays out. I'll be happy to field questions here or any other input you guys have, because I'm sure you have experiences from some of this.
The helper is also there to help the man remember to lead.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. The helper's there to help the man remember to lead. And she can do that in gentle ways, and be kind to your poor husband, and remind him without nagging. I mean, this is all these kind of challenges, but yeah, to help him. And her goal is, and my wife tells me this, her goal is to make me look good. She wants me to look good. She wants me to be the best God can have me to be. And that's what she wants. And so does she push sometimes? Well, yeah. And does she get frustrated sometimes when I'm less than I should be? Well, yeah, because she wants me to look good. That's her goal. You're right. Yeah, Bob.
Did you get your wife to enjoy mowing the lawn?
She had that long before I met her. She just enjoys it. She likes the exercise. So she enjoys that very much, yeah.
Could you comment on the situation that I have in my life? My brother is a stay-at-home dad.
Oh.
And my sister-in-law works full-time, and their relationship, especially with how they parent their kids, is kind of, it's off.
Okay, we're describing a situation.
There's one caveat to it. They made the decision because they didn't both want to work and have no one home with the kids.
Right. So the decision was made that the wife had the better job, so she'll work and he'll be a stay-at-home dad. And that was the decision they made because they wanted to make sure they're raising their own kids and not putting the kids in daycare kind of thing, whatever, so he's there, but she had a better job. This stuff happens, and I know it happens. I would contend that it better be a temporary thing because I think in the long run it's not healthy. And this is not a pleasant thing to hear, but the statistical evidence bears it out. Rhodes has some of this in his book. He talks about this, and he says the Mr. Mom thing is more of a myth, and we always find every Father's Day we find the Mr. Moms, but they tend not to work. And the women have a tendency to begin to resent their husband for not cutting it and not being more of a man, and the men end up resenting the wife for being the breadwinner. It's a very difficult thing to work. I can trot out all kinds of stuff, anecdotal, where people have written about this, the wife who had this guy who was real sensitive, but he was a stay-at-home guy, and she eventually just began to despise him, got rid of him. And, that is the tendency that it goes. And the reason is, I would contend the reason is because it's inverting the order and it's fighting against the way God has designed it. Does this mean that the guy has to make more money than the wife? Not necessarily, but if he doesn't, things tend not to work well. This is borne out so many times. The women with happier marriages don't make as much as their husbands. It's just the way it goes.
If that was a situation like if you were counseling those two, would you recommend that they both at least work?
I would say they need to reevaluate their priorities and what they're trying to accomplish and what's important. Maybe it's more important that he takes a lower paying job and they reevaluate what they're doing so that they can have, a marriage that's going to be more potentially successful. And this raises an interesting question, and I was going to get into this a little bit. This is the Greek word telos, which in English would look like this. Almost the same. Telos means end. More than that, it means goal and the idea of fulfillment. It's really important in your life and in your marriage and in your child rearing to know what your telos is. What's the goal? What's the purpose? What are we trying to accomplish? The fact is, a lot of people have no clue what their telos is. Or they just assume, well, it's to have good kids. What's that mean? I got to have my kid in lots of activities. Or I want to have a good marriage. What's that mean? Well, we both have to work and get lots of money so we can do things and have great vacations. What's your telos? Is your telos to retire early and have lots of money? Is your telos to have a big house and a great vacation and a vacation home? What's your telos? What's your goal? What's your purpose? It's imperative that you don't kind of wander through life without a telos, just kind of taking your cues from the society around you. You need to decide for yourself. What do I want? What's my goal? What's my purpose? I would submit to you that the telos for a Christian is very simple. Conform to God's will. So, the counsel I would give to a couple like that is you need to reevaluate. What are you trying to accomplish in life? What do you want out of life? What are you trying to accomplish in these kids? What do you want to teach them? And how are you going to get that done? Maybe you need to reevaluate everything. Cut back on your lifestyle, your standard of living, to choose a different reality. And the fact of the matter is, good, happy life does not equal, happy, big income. Maybe instead of having the high income, you need to cut back. And I know I'm stepping on all kinds of sensitive areas here, but I'm just not convinced that the dual income thing is an absolute requirement. Dual income, sure, but for what lifestyle? Maybe we need to say, okay, a lower lifestyle. Maybe 2-bedroom house is enough. Maybe an apartment is enough because we have a happy marriage and kids that we're raising for Christ. Maybe that matters more than we both work and lose all kinds of other things in the process because we're trying to get the American dream. What is the telos? Is the telos a bunch of stuff when you die? Or is the telos a life of character that has impacted your kids? What's more important? And we get confused on this all the time. And our culture pushes hard in one direction. And if we're going to be Christian people, we need to push back hard in the other direction and say, now, wait a minute. I'm not going to buy the lie. I need to think about what my telos really is.
Well, and it does sound like we're sacrificing our children for the God of materialism.
That can happen.
And that happens, I mean, the secular, like you were saying, the pressure that we have
Yes.
to do that.
Yes. Yes. Good. Yep.
How would calling and values play into the situation with the stay-at-home dad? You know, the wife has a calling to be a doctor, the dad's a teacher or a policeman or a pastor. You know, he's going to have a lower income always. And, you know, not everyone values money, or one spouse values that over way much more than the other. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, I would say the value maybe goes to a point, but see, ultimately it gets down to the whole idea of the dynamics of the relationship and who's responsible and who's really running the show and who's really taking care. And I don't care if the guy says, I don't really care about money, that doesn't matter that much. He is lying. Maybe the money doesn't matter, but the idea of the status and the stature and the I'm the one who's caring for the family, that matters. And he's going to feel emasculated. Guarantee it. Maybe not right away, but it's going to happen. And the reason I can say that so forthrightly is because he's fighting against the natural law. It's just wired into him. There will be exceptions. There's always the exception to the rule, but as a rule, it's just not going to work that way. It's just the way it is. Now, on the calling thing, this is interesting, opens up a whole other can of worms, which I don't have time for, but this is the whole question about vocation. And what is vocation? And Luther actually had a lot to say about this. And I don't have it in the resource sheet, but there's a great book by Gustav Wingren called Luther on Vocation. I guess is the name of the author. And if you want to pick that up, awesome reading. Luther on Vocation is the name of the book. And what Luther stresses is that your vocation is not just your career, but your vocation is all that you do that God has given you to do. My vocation, number 1, is husband. Number 2, father. Number 3, professor. Number 4, lay Bible Institute teacher. That's right up there. But you see, so my vocation starts with my God-given responsibilities. Well, and also son, brother. You know, I have all kinds of vocations. Those vocations are every bit as important as my vocation as professor. So when I'm making decisions about my priorities, sometimes I say the professor-pastor thing has to take second place or third place behind wife and children right now. And I would say the same kind of thing goes there. Maybe I have this vocation, but maybe I have a greater vocation to my family, and I have to make some choices. Okay? Yep.
You were talking about how different families that can look different, like your wife mows the lawn and pays the bills. But where else do we look in the Bible? Like the only place I know of is Proverbs 31. But where else do we look for what it means in a woman's role beyond submission, beyond child rearing and childbearing? What else?
I don't know if there's going to be a lot you're going to find. You're going to find about being godly. You're going to find Paul counseling her to, not get carried away with her adornments, and not, playing games that the world is playing. But, you see, that's part of the beauty of the freedom of this. People think it's so constricting. You're trying to be shoved into a box. There is no box. There's simply conformity to God's purposes. And if you can say with all confidence, I'm living within God's purposes. I'm living as a helpmate to my husband. Go for it. And if that means that in your situation in life, where the kids are, doing things at school, you've got some time on your hands, go pursue something. Go for it. Are you usurping your husband's authority? Absolutely not. You don't. And so there is no cut and dry picture. And you say, I don't believe in this kind of cookie cutter thing. But there is absolutely conformity to God's purpose and a willing, submissive spirit. That is there. That's the sine qua non. You've got to have that. But beyond that, I don't think there is this kind of a standard job description. And that's probably where the mistake comes. Because we think everybody's got to be the whatever her name was, Cleaver. What's her name? June. Thank you. I knew it was J something. June. It doesn't have to be like that. But it will be the submissive attitude. But how it all kind of plays out, I think there is a great deal of latitude there.
You can see it in Ruth. Have you read the book of Ruth? I mean, that is a lot of submissive.
Sure. Well, she's absolutely submissive in how that plays out. But she's not. But see, being submissive does not equal doormat. So, again, like it was pointed out, the good helper challenges her husband to be the best he can be. So is my wife quiet? No. When I'm not on track, she'll let me know. She's not stupid. She's got all kinds of thoughts. And I would be a stupid husband not to listen to her. So absolutely I listen to her. So she's got a caution. I'm thinking we should do this. She says, I'm not sure about that. Do I say, well, you're just a woman. I don't care. What an idiot. No, I listen to her. And I pay attention. But I'm still responsible. And she knows it. So she comes to me with her concerns, shares them. She doesn't have to carry the burden of making the decision. That she's not made for that. I have to carry that burden. But I do it with all of her input. So she is very much a viable, dynamic partner in this relationship in her role. But she knows where she fits, and I know where I fit. We both do our thing.
Well, remember when I brought up the example of the husband comes home and says, we're moving to Dallas, and she says, oh, that's terrible for the family and the kids and blah, 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 the schools. And he says, well, we're moving anyway.
He's an idiot.
Right. She has to go, right?
Ultimately, she's going to need to be submissive and trust God. And that would be her burden. But she doesn't have to be... But see, now, God's going to honor that because he expects the husband to be doing his job. And so he expects the husband not to be a dictator and not a fool, but to come home and to talk and to listen and to hear the concerns and to make a smart decision. Now, if the woman is unfortunate enough to be married to a fool, that's a tough thing. And I'll admit that. And in my marriage counseling, there were many times where I saw women married to fools. And I saw women marrying fools. And I just would shake my head. You know, what are you doing that for? And I would counsel them against it, but they would do it anyway. And so many times, just stupid people. Why are you doing that? And then a year later, they're in my office. Things aren't going well. Well, imagine that. So, but it's a burden. But life is frequently a burden. We all get given junk. So many of us have lousy hands. Some people have worse hands than others. I don't know why, and I feel for them. But, you know, when I have a woman who's in a really lousy marriage, do I say, well, get out? That's what God wants? No. Get back in there, do what you can, be submissive. I know it's a pain. I know it's unfair. I know it's unjust. Sorry. You know, it's unjust that my mom's dying of cancer. Well, that's unjust too. Can't do much about it. You deal with it. You just deal with what you got. Yeah.
Richard Eyer's written a book, Marriage is Like Dancing. And it's kind of like that metaphor that, you know, somebody has to lead in ballroom dancing. It's a subtle leading sometimes, and it's very much a partnership. But if both are trying to lead or both are trying to follow.
Right, exactly right. And there's this, and there's the sensitivity and the listening and the communication and all that beautiful stuff that happens when it's working well. And the potential for strife when it's not working well. I mean, it's all part of the reality. You bet. Yeah.
How does this work with women in the church? Reading the Gospels and taking in, you know, years ago that never happened.
Well, that's next week, Ray. Just getting ahead of the game here. Yes.
In response to what she was asking about different women in the Bible, you know, you got, you know, Deborah, you got Ruth, you got Esther. Mm-hmm. You had, like, I can't pronounce words too good, but Zelophehad's daughters.
Okay.
Remember, he didn't have any sons, so the daughters were requesting the fact that they wanted to inherit the land too. So God said they were right.
Yeah.
They were strong about it, and they insisted on Moses that they get a shared inheritance. But in Matthew chapter 1, it shows how much God cares for the, you know, women equally as men.
Right.
Is that in genealogies, you know, of ancient, you know, cultures and all that, they didn't name women, but in Matthew chapter 1, they named Tamar, Rahab, Ruth,
that's right.
Mary.
No, yeah.
And that's unusual.
That's
so
right.
God, you know.
God has a high estimation of women.
Right.
It's the point here. They are equal in dignity and value. Very important.
Well, and anywhere as Christianity has gone, I mean, just look at India. Look at India pre-Christian influence.
Right.
I mean, women were dirt. I mean,
correct.
It was dirt. So Christianity has elevated.
No, I appreciate that. This is a very good point to make. People often say Christianity squashes women. It doesn't. Actually, Christianity is empowering to women and teaches men to treat women with respect, and it helps women. You're quite right. And this is borne out historically and across the nations. That's right. Matt, then I need to press on.
How would you address the common viewpoint that kind of having gifts implies a calling to use those gifts? That
next week. Having gifts implies using those gifts. Seriously, I'll get to that next week. We'll talk about that more. I think I will address that pretty pointedly. I hope to. So, I don't mean to put you off, but I just did. So I do mean to. I'm going to put you off next week. All right. couple more things to wrap up. We're almost out of time. Subordination then, the third point he makes, I won't even write this up there. Subordination is good. Subordination is good, not an evil. It's good. We are all in subordination. I talked about this last week. And as was reminded to me during the break, subordination just means being in your place. In the place carved out for you. You get in your spot, and that's where everything works. So the man gets in his spot, and it works. The woman gets in her spot, and it works. That's what it means to be subordinate, just in the place that God has given you. The next point, fourth point, equality and differences between men and women are very good. Okay? The differences are very good. So there's this equality in our value and in our dignity, but there are differences, and these are good things. It's not like we have to try to overcome the differences. And one of the great tragedies of the 20th century has been the kind of the move of radical feminism, of the kind of leveling of everything. Trying to say there is no difference. A man and a woman, no difference, interchangeable. It's a flat-out lie. We all know it. But they have tried to push this on us, and the results have been devastating. And in so many ways, but that's kind of week 4. We'll get into the social implications. Even things like Title IX, and I know, wow, that's great for women. But, man, it's not such a good thing when it comes to social policy. So the differences are very good, and they're not to be tried to eliminate. So in other words, when you've got a child, and the child is a boy who's interested in active things, you don't try to settle him down and get him interested in dolls. Neither do you try to get your girl to start playing with guns. You know, oh, come on, be more like a boy. Come on, be more aggressive. No, just let them be what God has made them to be. They're different, and it's okay. It's a good thing. And so instead of trying to sensitize and feminize our boys, we should be teaching them to be young men, chivalrous. This is a good thing. And we should be encouraging women to pursue their nurturing abilities and their communication abilities. These things they're really good at. Women have these gifts and abilities. These are to be encouraged and nurtured in children, not somehow subverted. And this, I think, is one of the biggest things just with raising boys. And we've maybe come back from that a little bit. I know the book that was real popular, the Dangerous Book for Boys, you know, teaching boys just to do boy kinds of stuff. And that's a good thing. Boys need to be allowed to do this. They need to be taught what it means to be chivalrous. It needs to be taught, because it doesn't just come kind of automatically. Chivalry is a cool word, but it's also gone out of style. But it's a beautiful thing. See, this goes to opening doors. This goes to treating women with respect. When the ship goes down, who gets off first? Women and children. We all know it. We just know it's right. But what's our culture? If we're going to be true to our culture, ship's going down, well, whoever's smart, they can get off first. And whoever's young has got a life ahead, they should get off first. And if you're old, you know, you stay on board. And, you know, men and women, well, that doesn't really matter. See, it's just all backwards. And there's something really, really ugly about it, honestly. Really kind of ugly and tawdry about that. And there's something just beautiful about this, because it's the way God has put it to be. A man doing this. And see, the applications to our culture are really interesting. Like women in the military. Do I really want 18-year-old girls over there fighting for me? No, I don't. I don't. It's not right. Can they be in roles of support? Sure. That's been around for a while, but fighting for me? No. Think about some of this stuff. And we say, well, wait a minute, though. We're already way down the road on that one. Yeah, but is that a road we should be on? And we need to be thinking about some of the things a little more carefully. All right, next point is, this is an issue of obedience to Scripture. This is what God has taught us. And if we're going to be a complementarian, it's just a matter of being obedient. And then the last one, and I'm going to pick up on this one next week, we'll start here, is that the implications, and I have been kind of stressing this again and again, are huge. It goes way beyond marriage, and the implications of our rejection of a complementarian attitude infiltrate all of life. And next week, I'll pass out this little chart that Grudem has, and I'll start with that, and we'll talk about that and get into some of the implications of this. And then next week, we're going to zero in on, so what does this mean in the church? And I'll also start by talking about implications here. We'll pick apart marriage a little bit more and talk about any questions you might have. Then we'll start kind of zeroing this thing into what does this mean for the church. And then week 4, my plan is to kind of go back out and say, so what about the rest of society? And we'll have some Q&A time, and already halfway through. Time is up. Have a good night.